New York City. And as he was driving along, he reached up and he tapped the driver on the shoulder. And about that time, the guy just went crazy. He let out a big screech, and he speeded up and he ran, and he hit a tree, and I mean, he was just a mess. It was just almost a catastrophe. And finally, when he got stopped, and they surveyed the damage, he turned around to the passenger and he said, "Don't you ever do that to me again." And the passenger apologized, and he said, "Well, I didn't realize that a little tap on the shoulder would scare you that much." He said, "You don't understand. This is my first day driving a cab. And you are my first passenger. And 25 years in the past, I have driven a funeral hearse." Oh, well, today we are looking at the man Joshua, a man of commitment. I like Joshua. When I look at Joshua, I think there's a man that I can relate to. There's a man that I really enjoy reading about. And I'd like to start off by just reading Joshua 24:15. We had a plaque that had the last part of that in our house. I don't know where it is, Charlene. We've moved so many times. It's in the kitchen. I don't spend any time in the kitchen. How would I know it's in the kitchen? I'm in the dining room. She's in the kitchen cooking. But it says, "If it is disagreeable in your sight to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves today whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served, which were beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." I think each one of us today, each person sitting here, has to choose whom they will serve throughout life. And let me say, this is a worthy choice to make. As far as me and my house, we will serve the Lord. 2 weeks ago, we looked at Moses. His life was broken down into 3 40-year periods. Today, we'll look at Joshua. And we'll start where we started with each one of our biblical characters through the past few weeks, and we'll look at the cultural climate. Now, Moses had 40 years in Egypt, he had 40 years in Midian, and he had 40 years wandering around in the wilderness. And we see here in Joshua's life, he has 3 periods in different geographical regions. I'm not going to say 40 years because the Bible doesn't tell us. The Bible does tell us that he lived to be 110. And it does tell us that when Moses was leading the people out of Egypt, that he was a young man, an aide. And we know that Moses was 80 years of age when he went back to Egypt to bring the Hebrew nation out of Egypt and slavery. First, we see his life in Egypt, and that's when he was a young man. Doesn't tell us what age he was, other than the fact that he was just young. We know that he had 40 years with Moses as they wandered around in the wilderness, trying to find out till that generation that disobeyed God and rebelled against God died off. And then we have his life in Canaan. We don't know exactly how long that was. We do know that he lived to be 110. In all of these geographical regions, the people worshipped idols. Dawn, I thank you so much for that communion meditation. I could just skip about half of my sermon this morning because that's the worship of, literally the Bible defines an idol as nothing and worship as worth, what you spend your time on. And we see these people in all 3 of these geographical religions or locations worshiping foreign gods, idols. Nothing, basically. Worshiping nothing. Even the Israelite people worshipped idols and foreign gods. Joshua 24:20 through 23 says, "If you forsake the Lord and serve foreign gods, He will turn and bring disaster on you and make an end of you, after He has been good to you." But the people said to Joshua, "No, we will serve the Lord." Marilyn read part of this morning on this passage. But the people said to Joshua, "No, we will serve the Lord." Then Joshua said, "You are witnesses against yourself that you have chosen to serve the Lord." "Yes, we are witnesses," they replied. "Now then," said Joshua, "throw away the foreign gods that are among you." Did you catch that? The foreign gods that are among you. Here's the people that have been led out of Egyptian bondage. They've seen the Red Sea, or the Red Sea parted. And they've wandered for 40 years, and they still have those foreign gods in their midst. Throw away those foreign gods that are among you and yield your hearts to the Lord, the God of Israel. How does that apply to us today? I hear that all the time. That was years and years and thousands of years ago. I'm not going to say millions because I don't believe that. But if you're watching television, all the shows, they talk about the past, it'll say millions of years ago. Right there, whoa. That's a clue. That's a clue that they do not believe the biblical account of creation. How's that relate to us? These foreign gods that they've made with their hands, how does that relate to us? Do we have gods, those little gods, little g's, that we serve? As Don pointed out, it's whatever you place your value on. However you spend your time and your money, that's a god to you. Maybe it's sports. It seems like on everybody's mind right now is March Madness. And who's going to win the big tournament? I can tell you one thing, Don, IU's not going to win it. Mark Durr, Purdue's not going to win it. But that's on everybody's mind. They even have polls and lottery things that you can get into on who's going to win. Is it work? Is it possessions? Is it family? Is it money? What is a God to you that you put above God? Big G. Health? Your favorite car? What do you put above God? See, if you put anything above God, that is a little god, that's an idol to you. So does it apply to our life today, these passages here? Sure it does. Sure it does. That brings us to the challenges that Joshua encountered. There are three of them, I believe. I've kind of tried to summarize these. Military challenge. In other words, they were at the Jordan River and they were about to cross over into the Promised Land, and it was at flood stage, so we're going to see the Lord work there a miracle like He did at the Red Sea when Moses brought the Israelites out. Flood stage, it was a large river, and they walked through. He swelled up the river like cutting a slice of jello out. So there was a military challenge he had. There was an administrative challenge because Joshua had to be in charge of allotting all the land to the 12 tribes. And then there was a spiritual challenge. Let's take a look at Deuteronomy chapter 31, verses 7 and 8. We see two of those right here. Then Moses summoned Joshua and said to him in the presence of all Israel, "Be strong and courageous, for you must go with this people," this people, You can get an idea here of what Moses thought about these people he led out. You go with this people, not these people, not your family, not your people. You go with this people into the land that the Lord swore to their forefathers to give them. And you must divide it. See, here's the administrative. Military was before. As their inheritance. The Lord Himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Here's a beginning and ending with do not be afraid. Have courage. Do not become discouraged. Spiritually, we see the Israelite people were a rebellious people. The Bible tells us that. They complained to Moses, you've brought us out here to die. And then the Lord provides manna for them to eat. And they complained. They didn't want that. They wanted to go back and eat the leeks and onions of Egypt. They complained the whole time. And the Bible even calls them a stiff-necked people. Do you know what a stiff-necked person is? Charlene says I can be kind of stiff-necked sometimes. A stiff-necked person is one that you have... Well, we had a president that was kind of like that. The Show Me State, what is the Show Me State? Anybody know that? Missouri. Harry Truman. Yeah, you got to show me. You got to show me. That's kind of the way I am. Charlene will tell me something and I'll say it doesn't work that way. Where have you been all your life? And she said, Rex Dunning, I'm going to show you the show stick. I'm going to take care of you if you don't straighten up. What, you know... Oh yeah, you do. There are some people that just, it's their way or no way, and you have to prove everything to them. That's why the Bible says they were stiff-necked people. So Joshua receives a call here from Moses. And also a little later on, we're going to see that he receives that same wording from the Lord Himself for courage, strength, and to guard against becoming discouraged. You know, when you have to put up with someone as difficult as I am, it's discouraging. I mean, I've never been wrong but once in my life, and then I just thought I was wrong. That happened this morning and yesterday morning and the morning before, didn't it? So he had challenges that he had to face. And that brings us to the character that those challenges help develop. Judges chapter 2 gives us a little bit of insight into Joshua's character. It says the people served the Lord throughout the lifetime of Joshua. Evidently, he made an impact upon their lives because throughout his life, they served the Lord. And the elders who outlived him and who had seen all the great things the Lord had done for Israel. Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of God, died at the age of 110. And they buried him in the land of his inheritance at Timnath-Heres in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gaash. After that whole generation had been gathered to their fathers, another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what He had done for Israel. Do we have a task in front of us? Yes, we do. Our task is to make sure that our children and our grandchildren know who the Lord is. And we can show them who the Lord is by the life that we live, the life of faith. Each generation is dependent upon us to show them the love and the knowledge of the Lord. That's our greatest task. Parents, it's not assessing or accumulating trophies, wealth. The greatest thing you can pass on to your children is the respect and fear of the Lord. See, that will outlive you. Your possessions and what you leave them in a will, they may go through that. They may not even want it. But what if you leave them with a love for the Lord, you have been successful. And we have a generation who grew up here, and the parents may have served the Lord, but they didn't pass that on to the children. They neither knew the Lord nor what He had done. So, servant of the Lord is the first thing we see here. Joshua was loyal to Moses and loyal to God, and we see loyalty coming out here in Joshua 11:15. As the Lord commanded His servant Moses, so Moses commanded Joshua, and Joshua did it. Reminds me of the day when I was growing up. Dad would say, Rex, I want you to go out and... I got a better one to tell you. I went to Purdue University for 4.5 years. I was that smart that I couldn't make it in 4 years. I wanted an extra half semester. And I went to school there, and I learned everything Purdue had to teach me that I could learn. And I went home, and I'd interviewed with Alice Chalmers and a couple of the medicine companies for livestock prescriptions and drugs. And I told Dad, I said, I really want to farm. And he said, well, come on back home. And I tell you, the first day, Rita, you know this for a fact, the first day I went back home and I put on my white shirt and I thought, boy, I'm going to move right up into top spot here on the farm. Second in command. That's what Joshua was, second in command. And I went to work and Dad looked at me and he kind of snickered. He said, Rex, I'd like for you to go out to the hog barn out there. It's not one of those total confinement barns. It's just solid cement. And it was nasty from the winter because I graduated in January at Purdue. He said, there's a pitchfork and a scoop shovel out there. I want you to take the tractor and the manure spreader and clean that barn. I looked down at my white shirt, my dress pants, my dress shoes. I said, you got to be kidding me. He said, you start at the bottom. He did everything Moses told him to do. Joshua was always in the shadows of Moses. Scripture said he was Moses' aide. He was second in command. But he was loyal. Loyal to Moses and loyal to God. The Bible also said he was a wise man. Deuteronomy 34:9. Now Joshua son of Nun was filled with the spirit of wisdom because Moses had laid his hands on him. So the Israelites listened to him and did what the Lord had commanded Moses. Had a spirit of wisdom. He was humble. We could say he was humble. There's a lot of different characteristics here on Joshua's life. Committed is one that sticks out in my life. In fact, I entitled this "A Man of Commitment." Numbers 14, 6 through 9. See, we've got several books here: Exodus, Joshua, Judges, Deuteronomy, and now Numbers. And all of them are given accolades to Joshua. Joshua son of Nun and Caleb son of Jephunneh. Boy, I can't say that. Somebody help me out here. Alphabet. Who were among those who had explored the land, tore their clothes. Now see, there were only two, and these two are the only ones of the 12 spies, the only ones of those adults, males, over 20, that were allowed to enter into the promised land. All the rest of them, that's the reason they wandered for 40 years. Only the two Joshua and Caleb. And they tore their clothes and said to the entire Israelite assembly, "The land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, He will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will swallow them up. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them." And we see that they argued with the other 10 spies and the entire assembly of Israelites. We can do this because the Lord is with us. They even tore their clothes because all of them said, "No, it can't be done. Can't be done." We also see that Joshua and Caleb were the only two males over 20 that were able to enter the Promised Land. It didn't say anything in Scripture that I could find that was negative characteristic that Joshua had. Oh, I'm sure he had some because he was human. You know, when we looked at Abraham, he lied. He lied twice about his wife, and that kind of jumped out at you. We looked at Jacob, and Jacob was a deceiver. He deceived his brother, deceived his father. Then he was deceived by his father-in-law. We looked at Joseph, and he was arrogant when he was younger. He told his brothers, he said, "You're going to bow down before me." And his brothers, what'd they do? They said, "We'll show you." They sold him into Egyptian bondage. And then Moses killed a man. And we see in Deuteronomy, Moses couldn't even enter into the Promised Land. He looked at it from a distance. But I don't see anything the Scriptures mention about Joshua as far as negative characteristics. But I'm sure he had some, as we all do. So there's a good man, a committed man, committed to the Lord. Well, what are some of the certainties for living that we see? What lessons can we learn from the life of Joshua that will help us live a life that is pleasing to God? Joshua 24:15 sums up the essence of Joshua's priority for living. "As far as me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Joshua put God first in his life. And that's, I think, what we are called to do. So what lessons can we learn? First, God has a plan for your life. Every one of you. God has a plan for your life. Always second in command. Years and years and years in the shadow of Moses. And now it's time for him to lead the people into the Promised Land. Joshua 1 and 2. And we're going to be in Joshua 1 for all three of these living insights. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said, and the Lord's talking to Joshua now, "Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' aide, Moses my servant is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan into the land I'm about to give to them, to the Israelites." Get ready. Your time is here. Your time is here. God has a plan for your life. Time and time again, I talk to people and they say, "I really don't know what God's will for me is." It's not that hard to figure out. God's will for you is to give Him your heart and your love. He'll open up the doors. You be ready to walk through. And He'll walk with you. He'll give you the strength. If it's on your heart and it's always there and always pressing upon your mind, chances are God's saying, "I want you to do something about that passion that you feel in your heart." He's calling you. That's a plan He has. Give Him all that you are. God rewards faithfulness. That's the second lesson. Joshua 1:3-5. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon, from the great river, that's the Mediterranean River, the Euphrates, that's on the other side, the other boundary, all the Hittite country to the Great Sea on the west, that's the Mediterranean. No one will be able to stand up against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you, and I will never leave you nor forsake you. That's a promise. And we'll look at this third point in a little bit, but that's a promise. When he went in, they didn't have any of this land secured. God had to open up the river, the Jordan River, and they crossed over into the promised land. And God had, it was still occupied. They had to fight. There were giants in the land. There were giants in the land. Nephilim. And they had to go and fight those giants. Charlene and I were talking the other day, and she said, well, Goliath, I think it was a Jeopardy question we were I don't know if it was Jeopardy. Anyway, we were talking about giants. And I said, well, there's Goliath. And she said, were there other giants? And I said, yeah, I think so, but maybe not. I said, no, I don't think there was. And she said, yeah, there's one. I said, who? She said, Og. Og? So we looked that up in the Bible, and you know what we found out? This guy's 12 foot tall and 6 foot across. Big man. A little bigger than I am. 12 foot tall. Four cubits. Was it 4 cubits, Charlene? A cubit's 18 inches, I believe, 18 to 20 inches. 4 cubits and 6 or 8 cubits high. 4 cubits wide. Wide load. He was sweet and low. Wide load. They had to take that land. Caleb, when he wanted his, he went to Joshua and he said, give me my possession. Give me my land. And Caleb said, all right. Go get it. It's yours. And Joshua said, Caleb said, I'm 80 years old. It wasn't something that he just went next door at the grocery store and picked up. He had to fight. He had a battle. He had to wage war. He had to wage war. But God is faithful. God is faithful and rewards faithfulness. He gave them the land, the promised land. Finally, the third point, and I've already got into a little bit of that, there may be obstacles to overcome. I want you to pay attention as the Lord's talking to Joshua here in verses 6 through 9. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their forefathers to give them. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Do not let this book of the law depart from your mouth. Meditate upon it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Sure, there's going to be obstacles. There's going to be obstacles in your life as well. There's going to be people telling you, you can't do that. If you stand on God's Word, you can. Because He's with you. That's the promise you have. Be faithful. And it seems like we're in times where there's no respect for God. or God's morality or God's way. But that does not give you an excuse